Welcome to Momma-Sota, the podcast where we dive headfirst into the beautiful mess of motherhood. I'm your host, Monica Eichmann, and I'm here to keep it real. In a world that changes by the minute, parenting can often feel like an uphill battle. We all want what's best for our children, but what that best looks like varies for every one of us. Momma-Sota is your passport to the unfiltered, unapologetic world of mommy. No perfectly edited snapshots or unattainable ideals here. We're here to share the ups and downs, the triumphs and tantrums, the mess and the beauty of being a mom. Join me as we explore the raw and authentic side of parenting. This is your safe space to vent, laugh, and learn as we navigate the unpredictable journey of raising strong, capable, and independent children for the future. Hey mamas, welcome to today's episode of Momma-Sota. Of course, you've got me, your host, Monica Eichmann. I'm a stay-at-home mom to 3 wonderful children, whom you might even hear in the background a few times. Joining me today is special guest Tessa Kennedy. She is going to be sharing with us her journey to motherhood. In comparison to most, or at least to me, her path was what many would consider more challenging, unique, and perhaps unconventional. Welcome, Tessa. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your family setup as it stands today?
Okay, great. So as she said, my name is Tessa Kennedy. I live in Ham Lake, Minnesota. I am a working mother to 4 with a blended family. So I have 16-year-old stepdaughter, a 14-year-old stepson, an 8-year-old biological son, and an almost 3-year-old biological son as well. And I am married to Mark.
Excellent. So with that, let's just kind of jump into, I guess, your journey. So can you just share with us where kind of your starting point with all of that?
Sure, absolutely. So in my 20s, I was what now I think is coined a serial monogamous. So I had long-term boyfriends throughout my 20s and into my early 30s, and I found myself at 32 completely single and kind of working hard, owned my own house, did all of the things, and I just kind of paused and said, what's next? And what happens if I meet a great guy and he doesn't want kids? And I just started to kind of go through kind of a little checklist in my mind, as I'm a checklist person. And just at that same time, a coworker of mine came to me and shared her story of a consult that she had. She is a lesbian, and so she had a consult with her doctor about the different ways that she could become a mother. And she just shared with me all of the details about all of the fertility challenges that she had no idea she had. And she was 3 years older than me. And it kind of stopped me in my tracks, and I thought, oh my, I didn't even consider that there would be issues of becoming a mother. I just thought I needed to wait until I met the right guy, and then I would kind of hit play and we would have this great wedding and I would become a mom. So it shook me to my core in terms of thinking I didn't even consider that step, that there might be an issue. I was on birth control and was very careful throughout my 20s. And so I just thought I was doing everything right. So I never had any pregnancy scares or with any boyfriends or anything like that. So I just assumed like this was the journey, this was the path. And next came the husband and then the baby. And so, based on that conversation I had with her, I immediately started to research, oh my gosh, what are my options then? I'm 3 years younger than her. And what can I do? And so it kind of spurred me to my first consult with a fertility doctor. So I bypassed my regular doctor based on the things that I read and remember this was back in 2000 and probably 12 and 13 when I was started this. And I wanted to talk to someone that lived and breathed fertility. And so it brought me to a fertility doctor where I started to undergo just basic tests and tried to figure out kind of where my baseline was and what I thought was going to happen, where they were going to say, God, you're just a great, healthy 32-year-old. And, we're here to support you when you meet Mr. Right, is what I thought was going to happen.
Right. You weren't ready for like your clock is ticking?
I wasn't. And I thought at 32, I guess, you always feel like you're young at heart. And, from that perspective, and then you have plenty of time and you see all these celebrities having kids in their 40s and 50s. And so the media, I guess, portrays it as there's no issue, like you're 32, you have plenty of time. And, but then you start to do that woman math and you're like, well, even if I meet the right guy tomorrow, you're going to date for a while, then you're going to get married. And I was like, oh my gosh, even if that does happen for me, I'm looking at 35 before we're ready to have babies. And so the woman math in me kind of just said, okay, I don't know what to do here. And so I paused after that first consult with all my results. and everything like that. I just kind of paused and then took some time to figure out what my next step would be.
So with that, like you said, you had your consult and you kind of got that first set of results. Can you share with us what I guess that looked like?
Absolutely. So, based on, I want to say I was probably well into 32. So, I was probably knocking at 33. And I was told I had low egg reserve, which is another term for low AMH. And when you're, if anyone on this podcast wants to search anything, but what it means is I don't have as many eggs as I should. And then the quality of the eggs is in question as well. So, they trace it back all the way to when I was in my mother's womb of something happened and there was stronger testosterone, and so the amount of eggs, which are supposed to be in the millions for us, I had like hundreds. So I had a very reduced chance of having any eggs, and then a quality egg at that. And so it made me think, speed up the time clock in terms of making a decision on what I do next, knowing that, as we all know, each month you lose eggs. And they said, you're losing at a much higher rate and you don't have as many to begin with. So he just said, I don't want to put any pressure on you, but I would make a decision on what you want to do within the next couple of years.
Which is a point you brought up, very interesting. I think as women, it's crazy that sometimes we're not taught, or maybe we just don't recall that the number of eggs we are born with is it.
Yep.
Like, as we start losing those eggs, our body's not creating more eggs. Whereas for a man, that sperm count, it just keeps, producing and producing and producing. And
Right.
so it's a much different, take on that reproduction that, like I said, sometimes I don't think we're either told or we just don't recall.
Yes, absolutely.
So I was just gonna say, so from there you kind of got that, like, I'm assuming you were more shocked and not prepared with that result.
I was shocked, and I was somewhat happy that I went in at 32 versus my friend that was, 3 years older than me, and so she had even less options. And so the good news of that consult was everything else looked good. We ran all these tests, we looked at my fallopian tubes and looked at every kind of other reproductive organ that you can have, and everything else looked really good. The only issue I had at that time was the low egg reserve. So he said, what I want you to hear is that with that issue just means that time and just different options need to be discussed, but looking at your body as a whole, it's ready to be pregnant. So that's kind of what the takeaway message was, of there isn't all these other things that I hear all these other women have to go through with endometriosis and all of the things. None of that was present, at least at my first consult. So that was a good news. And so I went away, and because I am just by nature, I love to research and I love to look at my options, I just started to Google all of these things. And in 2012 and 13, I would say there was probably a handful of articles, but just there wasn't a lot of information about what to do next, especially if you're not with a partner. So then I had to factor in, well, if I do anything next, it's not, I need to figure out the sperm factor as well. And there definitely was like 2 articles in the whole internet about people's journeys with that process.
Wow, that's astounding.
So, yeah, that's where I started to think, I have no idea what this even is. I didn't even know, what the coin single mother by choice was at the time. It just wasn't in the media or on the internet much at all. But what I did find with, hours of research was this one kind of protocol about what they did and what they would recommend. And I literally printed out, I think, 30 pages of whatever this protocol was. I read through it all. And then my next consult, he said, I have some ideas. And I said, so do I, in my little file folder. And I pulled it out, and so we kind of walked through both of them. And we ended up following that same exact protocol that I had printed out, literally with all the same medications, everything like that. I mean, he just said, this is mostly what I had recommended for you anyway, based on our conversation, and, with a couple tweaks. And so based on that conversation in 2013, I then started the process of becoming a single mother by choice, which means undergoing a lot of different medications to prep your body. And then obviously finding sperm, then. That was the next phase that I needed to go through, is to find the other half to my egg issue.
So at that point, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is kind of just, again, like we said, where the media leads us.
Yeah.
You're kind of going through a catalog.
You literally are. So there's probably, there's more now, or at least there's more now that I see that I'm part of these groups on Facebook and Instagram. But that I found one that was local. So as you start to go through this process and you're kind of obviously overwhelmed with thinking, "Oh my gosh, I don't have any eggs," and then the eggs that are out there are not great, and you kind of put this in your mind of making breakfast and just how horrible this could potentially be if you just don't have any good quality eggs. You're just never going to get breakfast. And so you're like, this is interesting." So I tried to put that on the back burner, thinking I'm doing the right protocol. I've done all the research. The doctor's agreeing with me, all of the things. And so when I started, and then, as a single person, you just kind of get to go, what traits would you like your baby to have if this does work out? And being from the Midwest, thought I really want a Midwesterner. Like I want someone that kind of grew up with the Midwestern values and stuff. And so there's actually a sperm bank in suburb of Chicago. And so I found that sperm bank, had a couple conversations with them, and then yeah, it absolutely is. So it's you search online and you can kind of filter by different traits, ethnicities, all of these kind of different qualities that you want. And so I did that, and it was narrowed down to two people. Is through my first process of this, it was narrowed down to two different donors.
Sure. So at that point, like you said, you've kind of selected a donor. And in your head at this point, are you saying, I'm going through with becoming, like you said, a single mother by choice?
After my consults and then all of the research and then the follow up, I talked to two really good friends and my mom. And I just said, I'm a little bit overwhelmed with all of the thoughts and like, could this really happen? And what do you think? And I'm in my own little kind of silo here. I work from home, all of these things. So I said I need somebody's opinion. Am I crazy? Am I, is this the right path? And they all said, I can't believe like you haven't made the appointment. Of course this is the right decision. This makes total sense. My mom asked if she could pick out the donor. I mean, I had this huge kind of cheering squad around me of course this is the right choice. Why would you wait? You're 32. Who knows if you're going to meet anyone? Yes, like you've done all this research, like why would you even hesitate? Like we're glad you called, but hang up and call the consult back and start this process. So,
So you had
yeah,
tons of support from
yes.
friends, family. What
Yeah.
was your biggest in your head at that time kind of like question or concern? Because I imagine for myself, and this is just knee jerk, like right
Yeah.
now, thinking like, okay, I get pregnant, and then all of a sudden in a couple weeks I meet Mr. Right. Then what? Like that would be like my big thought in my mind.
That definitely was. Yeah, I would say the two biggest thoughts were, what if I do this and it changes my whole life in terms of that? What happens if I do get pregnant and I'm 3 months pregnant and then I meet this amazing guy and it doesn't work out because of this? Or so that was number one. And then number two, I also was like, what happens if I try this and it doesn't work and I don't have another option? So I
Sure.
think both of those two things were the big things that were on the top of my mind after I talked to my family and, was like, am I crazy to think about doing this?
All right. So then it's like, okay, going for it.
Yes.
What's the next steps then?
So one of my favorite pieces of this journey was I was torn between these two donors, and they both on paper, you can't see adult photos of them, so you have no idea what they turn out to look like as an adult, but you get to see these adorable baby photos. But everybody is adorable as a baby. So but all the other qualities, all the things, there was like just slight differences between the two. And I called the donor bank, and the person at the front desk answered, and I said, I'm trying to decide between 232, and that's who I ended up choosing, and then 426 or whatever it was. And she's like, "Oh, that's an easy decision." And I said, "Oh, why?" Like I was like, "God, is one person just terrible person?" Or and she's like, "Number 232 brings us coffee every time he comes in to donate and like asks how our day is, and he's very engaging with us, and he always brings us coffee every time he comes to donate." So she's like, "We just love 232." So she's like, "If you're thinking about him, he's amazing." And so that was, I mean, so I love that part of it because that obviously helped make my choice. So that is the donor that I chose based on the qualities and then obviously what they said about him at the sperm donor bank.
So is it standard? I know you never see like the adult pictures and stuff, but is it standard for the baby pictures to be part of the process?
Yes. So you
Oh, I
do
didn't know
even,
that.
and yes, yeah, I didn't either. So and you kind of, I would even say baby pictures and then into like, I don't know. I think I probably have like a 5 or 6 year old picture. So like child
Wow.
adolescence or whatever. So I can kind of see what the donor looks like as well. And a big thing for me was at 18 as well, the donor can decide that can be known. So if my now 8-year-old son at 18 says, I really want to know who my donor person was, this my donor that I selected, my son can reach out to. The donor can't reach out to him, but my son can reach out to him at 18. So he's called what's called a known donor. So if my son for some reason needs to have that connection,
Mhm.
that donor has said, yes, you can, connect with me at 18, which I thought
Now,
was important.
okay, I was gonna say, is that like part of their donor profile essentially? Like, yes, I would let someone reach out to me, or no?
Yes. Yep,
Okay,
it's called known or unknown. So and most of them I will say are not. So most people don't want them to come out and to find them. They want to be
sure.
anonymous and they're doing it for whatever reason they're doing it for. So that was why it was very much narrowed down to two people, was
I was
the
gonna say,
known
was that
piece of
part of
it.
your selection
Yes.
process?
Yes, because I obviously had no idea I was going to meet Mark. So I just said, if there is something at 18 that my son is craving from, like need to feel some kind of connection, I wanted him to at least have that option to reach out to him.
Sure. And I was gonna say, and I would assume then that's kind of in the donor's contract that they can't just kind of like change their mind.
I think so. Yeah, I asked the sperm donor, the place that a few times, and they said, yes, pending that he's still alive at the time when he turns 18, there's no reason that they shouldn't be able
Receptive
to.
to that.
Yes,
Sure.
yes.
All right. So then, I guess from there, you selected a donor, and what do you need to do next?
So then it's literally kind of like going on Amazon and you purchase the sperm and then they send it right to your fertility clinic. So you try to time it based on when the things are going to happen medically at the clinic. And then you go in, and the biggest decision you have to make is between an insemination or IVF. And with my low egg reserve issue, IVF was off the table. You need to like harvest 18 to 20 eggs at any given time. And the doctor said there's no way that you're going to have that. So then the next step is, once the sperm arrives at the clinic, then you go in for your appointment and you get what's kind of called, inseminated. Like, it's called an IUI now, but it's old school. Back when, we were younger, it's an insemination. So they put the sperm in the catheter and then they put it inside of you.
So with that, it's like you said, timed with your ovulation.
Hmm.
And between that and the IVF, like you said, they both have different, I guess, percentages or what would take hold, I would assume.
Yes, you have a much lower chance of getting pregnant with an IUI. Anybody would. So anybody, regardless of whatever your fertility issue is, has a much lower chance, because if you think about it, just like you when you had your 3 kids naturally, you have to penetrate a lot of different body parts to get to the egg and then to fertilize the egg, whereas it's the same with IUI. So all they're doing is putting it just like you would naturally conceive it. With
Yep.
IVF, the egg and the sperm go together before they even enter your body, so you already have a full embryo through IVF.
Sure.
So
Yep.
IUI, I think the average, just no, even if you have no fertility issues, if you're a husband and wife and you're like, we can't get pregnant, you do an IUI, I want to say it's like 17 to 25% successful on your first one. And my doctor gave me about a 7% chance. He said, based on what it looks like after I took all the medicine, did all the shots, did all the things, he said, I give you about a 7% chance. But he said, the fact that you're even trying is a good thing, because next year it's going to be lower than 7%. So I had
And
about a
that's based
7%
on like
chance.
your egg health.
Egg health, and then you go in for different ultrasounds all the time after you're taking all this medicine. So I had to give myself about 4 shots every day for, I don't know, probably 40 days. And then you go in every couple of weeks and they look at your eggs that are maturing. So it's supposed to amp up your egg quality and the size of them. And so they could see it on there. They could see, like, and it was funny, I have the picture still. You're supposed to get like 10 eggs that are moderately sized, and none of the other eggs got any bigger, and one just took all the medicine. So this one huge egg became like gigantic egg on the screen, and all the other little ones look like tiny pebbles next to it. And so the nurses were like, if you get pregnant, it's definitely going to be with this gigantic egg, because none of the other ones, are taking to the medicine. For whatever reason, this big egg is sucking all the medicine to it. So it's like this huge rock next to these tiny little pebbles.
But now, is that in hopes that that egg is the one that's released at ovulation?
Yeah, that was the idea, is,
Okay.
the idea is like 10 of them should get moderately, and then it wouldn't matter which one kind of
Right.
ovulated, was, what's the protocol or what the hope is. But so we would, laugh obviously every time we would see it. So every time I went in, this egg just got bigger and bigger, and none of the other ones got, I would say they probably got maybe one half bigger than they were supposed to be, but then this huge one. So that's what the nurses took pictures of and stuff. And they said, if you get pregnant, it's going to have to be this one, because there's no, so this is one that's going to have to release, and all the things had to happen as it should for this to be successful.
Sure. So then you have your procedure, you have the IUI.
Yep.
Where do you go
I
from there?
I had my IUI and it was 2 weeks before my 35th birthday when after all the medicine and after everything and figuring everything out. So I was 2 weeks shy of turning 35 and
About 3 years into your journey at this point?
you are. Yep, I was
Okay.
about 3 years after doing the research and doing the things and trying to make sure I had everything else. So from my initial consult was probably 32 and a half to getting actually inseminated was almost 35.
Okay.
Yes. Yep, it was exactly about that time frame, I would say. And then you're in the 2-week wait like every other mom of, are you pregnant? Are you not? What does this feel right? All of the things. And so I want to say it was Halloween. I turned 35 on the 28th of October. And on Halloween, I went in for the blood test and they called me back within 2 hours. And they said, everything looks like you're pregnant. You have the high numbers, HGH, all of the things are looking right. And then they said, this is so exciting. Go celebrate. It's very exciting. They said, but, call us back on Monday. I think it was a Friday and then I called back on Monday and they said, "Okay, so it's great news, but now comes the real part. Like now you have to keep the pregnancy. Like getting you pregnant was, climbing up Mount Everest, but now we need to like make sure that we can get you down. So, now there's more medicine that you need to take now to keep the pregnancy."
Sure.
So I found out I was pregnant on like I said around Halloween time and then just more medicine, doing all the things. And then really that next 9 months other than being alone during the process was similar, I would say, to all my friends who have went through, a pregnancy. Like I didn't have any issues at all with pregnancy other than, I mean, I had the same issues. I threw up all the time. I did all the things that everybody else does, but I had nothing else other than, there was no one there to go buy me ice cream or do anything like that. I saw my friends' husbands doing all of that kind of stuff.
Sure. Did you have extra appointments then? And were you going to a regular OB or were you still going to like the fertility clinic?
No, that's a good question. It's emotional and sweet at the same time. You actually graduate from the fertility clinic. So once you reach a certain point, I want to say it was 8 weeks to a regular fertility. You
Okay.
graduate back to your fertility. Then you become just a regular. I became a what I think they called it a geriatric
I was going to
person
say
over
geriatric
35.
because you're
Yeah.
35.
Yeah, I became a geriatric person, which God, that really ages you when you're, 35 and pregnant and by yourself. But yeah, I became a geriatric one. But yeah, but then it just goes. Then you go back to the regular process of, every couple of months you go, and then every week you go, and all of that kind of stuff, and talking about how you want to deliver and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah.
And so okay, you make it 9 months. And at this point, you are still single, you're dating. What's your.
I had met a few people early in the pregnancy. So I had purchased a new house kind of back where in the neighborhood of kind of where I grew up, probably 20 minutes. So obviously then you're kind of plugged back into a bunch of people that you grew up with. So I had dated a couple of people and, did that kind of stuff. But as I started to show, it got weird to me. And I just said, I need to focus on this. One of my best friends was getting married when I was like 8 months pregnant. So we did all the bachelorette stuff. And I just said, this is a really good time for me to pause that and focus on this because I feel weird going on a date with a baby belly and then trying to explain what's going on. And there's not like an ex boyfriend that's going to, it came too complicated for me. And so I want to say probably at about 3 months when I started to show, I just paused and I didn't do any of that. I didn't date. I still went out and was social and everything like that, but no, I didn't go on any dates until my son was I want to say probably 18 months or almost 2 years old. I just paused that and focused on being a mom.
All right. So, like you said, you had your son, so the
Yes.
pregnancy went well.
Yes.
So then you've kind of mentioned at the beginning when you're introducing that you have another child after that and your husband, Mark. So, why don't you tell me about meeting Mark and how that all went?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had Brevin, my son, who's now 8, the July of 2015. And that I think for any mom, just with a partner or not, it's just a shock to your system of just how much lack of sleep you get. And everything was just kind of on me. My mom helped, at the beginning and did that kind of stuff. But it's just that transition from non-mom to mom is a lot. And then especially layering on, obviously, it's just you. So all the feedings and everything was just on you at night and all of that kind of stuff. So fast forward to, I just, like I said, I just kind of focused on that for a long time, and went, met my friends and did all that kind of stuff. And I joined a bunch of those classes with baby and me. And so I met some friends there and did all of those kind of things. And I started to think, as he got to be like 1.5, I bet I'm going to meet someone at one of those, ECFE classes, one of those early education classes, or like in T-ball. I bet I'm going to meet another single dad. That's probably what's going to happen, is like, it's just going to be natural and organic. And we're both going to have kids, and, kumbaya is kind of what I thought was probably going to happen.
Sure. It's that woman thing again. We're planning everything out
Yeah.
and doing the math.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I just kind of figured that would happen. And as he got a little bit older, I was like, well, I'm not, it's a lot of moms and dads there's not a lot of single dads going to these early, there's not a lot of single dads that have infants and toddlers. And so I just said, there's no reason I, can't peek on some of these dating sites. So we actually met on Bumble, which was a big dating site back then. I think it's still out there now, but it was big then, because women got to initiate the conversation. You weren't bombarded by all these men asking for your information or name or anything like that. It was a very women empowered app where no one could message you until you messaged them, which I liked,
Okay.
because then I was like, I don't have to filter through a bunch of people that are 25 or don't have jobs and everything like that. So I joined Bumble, I want to say, I don't know, probably January of 2018. So my son was a little bit, probably like 2.5. And I went on a few dates. And then in April of that year, so April of 2018, I had my first date with Mark. And we were supposed to meet at the YMCA. So my 2-year-old could go into the play area, and we were just going to like hang out and talk. And so it's interesting what you do as a single mom too, of dating and stuff like that. But there happened to be a big snowstorm. And so I said, I'm not driving. I'm not going to go to the YMCA. It might be closed, all the things. I said, we're going to have to reschedule. And he was like, well, what if I just come to your house? And I was like, this is weird. I don't know if I can handle, like, that's weird. My son's here. What, and it was, I
I
mean,
would
it
say it's
probably gave
always
us
that,
10
yeah,
inches
that
of
big
snow.
question, like, when does someone get to meet my
Yeah.
child?
Yeah.
And
All
you're
the
like, at the
things. And,
same
I'm like, what
time?
am I going to do if he's, yeah, I have needs to, or, all of those kind of things. So, but I had talked to Mark for probably 2 weeks before then. So on the phone, in messaging, all that stuff. And we had this, great connection. And so it was a Sunday, and I said, sure. I'm like, why don't you come over at, like 4:30 or 5 o'clock? Like, we can all eat together, and then we'll put him to bed and we can watch a movie. It's kind of what I thought, or whatever. And he came over and brought ice cream for Brevin. Brevin was in the bathtub. He came over a little bit early, and there was just this connection. He read him books that day. He played with him. It was so sweet to see their interactions together. And he's an amazing person to me as well. And so the rest is history, in terms of, I think that was April of 2018. I met his older kids at the end of May of 2018, and we were engaged by October of 2018. So it was very fast. Once it was that kind of proverbial moment that maybe most people have in their 20s, but when you know, you know. So I was like,
Yeah.
he's amazing. He loves my son. Brevin started calling him dad within like 2 weeks, and I kind of looked at Mark, and Mark's like, I'm good with it. And I'm like, well, this is a lot. Like, that's a lot for, just meeting me. But Mark
Right.
just kind of always just kind of rolled with it. Just, obviously I had explained that, there's no dad, and, all of the things. So it just all kind of fell into place, like, like it was supposed to, just much later in my life. And so we got married a couple of months before I turned 40. So we got married in July of 2018, and I was 39 at the time, and Brevin had just turned 4.
Okay. So from there, you have a 4-year-old, and then how old were his two kids?
Oh, when we got married, they were 12 and 10. So they were 12 and 10 when we all got married. So 4, 12, and 10 when we all got married.
And then obviously with Brevin, you have sole full custody. What
Yes.
was the kind of situation with his two kids?
They have a 50-50 custody, and his ex-wife is very easy and amazing to deal with. So she's never lived more than 10 minutes away. She's remarried. Her husband has 2 kids as well. So their communication works really well back and forth. So there's no, it's a really well balanced relationship even before I joined it. So I mean, there's no animosity, and so we have them 50% of the time. So we have those kids 50% of the time, and then we have our 2 100% of the time.
All right. So then you have another child. At what point, I guess, did you or Mark kind of have the thought of like our family's not complete? Or who kind of brought that up, or how did that come about?
Well, I think this is another, like, as I was thinking about this podcast, that was another funny moment. So, like I said, Mark and I met on that Sunday of the snowstorm, and he said, "What are you doing tomorrow for lunch, Monday?" Like, meaning Brevin will go to daycare, and like, do you want to do lunch together? And I said, I'm actually going to get inseminated. I was like, I just hesitated for a minute. I'm like, well, I can't not share that. Like, he's going to wonder. So actually had already planned to try for a baby number two the day after that I met Mark. So I said, like, I can't go to lunch with you because I might go get pregnant. And he was like, what? I said, yeah, well, and in my head, I'm like, well, I can't stop that process because of just a guy I just met. So I
Right.
stayed true to the course, went and had the same process happen all over again. I'd already done all the medicine and all of the things. And I mean, and true to Mark's form, like that later in that day of Monday, he's like, so how does it go? Like, just very supportive and sweet, because, he never once said like, well, maybe you should pause it because we met. I mean, none of that. It was very much like, well, how did it go? Do you feel pregnant? And obviously, based on this conversation we're having, it did not work out. I wasn't pregnant. And so from that, I guess from the initial time we met, I said, I really, really would like to have another child. And now, especially with you, I would love to have another child with you, with somebody. Like, I always kind of pictured in my head having two kids. And so it was always on the table because literally the next day I was trying to have a baby even after meeting him. And so we had talked about it throughout our engagement and getting married and all of those things. And another factor with Mark in the picture was he had had a vasectomy with his ex-wife, so he no longer had the sperm. So that gave us an extra layer. It's never just been an easy process for me, which I've learned is probably good, because then it just forces me to go do the research and what do I have to do and what has to happen, and then how do I present it to all the people that need to have a say in it, is kind of how I looked at it.
Right. So for my own curiosity and possibly the curiosity of some of the listeners, with this second IUI, what was did you have a similar egg situation? Were multiple eggs growing? Were none of them growing? What was that?
The second time, it was more equal, like it was supposed to be the first time,
Uh-huh.
which now I look in hindsight, obviously thinking like, I think I needed a bigger egg. Like, I think I needed the one like that gave me the 8-year-old now, because
Yep.
it wasn't successful. And I only had worse egg reserve then too, because obviously now we're almost 3 years later, way less eggs. And so all the ultrasounds, kind of showed, I would say, medium eggs, like medium eggs this time. So it definitely was my body took the medicine very differently than it took it the first time. It shared the wealth versus kind of sucking it all up into one egg. So they didn't say anything about that during the ultrasounds of having less or better chances, but
Mhm.
now obviously with the outcome being negative, I wonder, to your point, if it was because the eggs didn't mature as big as they should have, like they did the first time.
And then did you have the same donor this time around, or did you go through the whole process of selection again?
Same donor.
Okay.
I loved the experience with the place and what they said about him. So I just figured, and at the time, my 2-year-old was very verbal and, I mean, it was hitting all of his development marks. And so I was like, why rock the boat? And you
Right.
guys would be biological siblings then too. So
Right.
nope, same donor, same everything, same medicine, same protocol, and it didn't work. And that's where I thought in my head, this is where I see all the stories of the women that have done like 10, 15 IUIs of no success, because the doctor said the more you do it, the greater chance of success you have. So I understand why they're doing it, but it really is just, it's what's supposed to happen at the time.
Sure. Okay. So then back to Mark. Sorry, I had to
Mhm.
jump around a little
No,
bit.
it's okay.
So you still want another child. Mark's good with having another child, but he has a vasectomy.
Yeah. Mark is very, obviously you can tell from this podcast that I'm kind of unique, and I don't I'm not conservative. Whatever the options are, let's do them. Let's think about it. I've been this way, from day one. It's like, oh, okay, that's not the right way to do it. We'll figure out a different way. Mark's very conservative. Got married at 21, had children, very conservatively, all of the things, like nothing out of the traditional realm. So when we started talking about then he and I having a kid, he said, well, I think it should just be like up to whatever happens. Like, we should just try naturally. And if it happens, it happens. And I tried to be patient with that, but I kind of just said, that's not how my body works. My body
Like,
isn't
it's not
the
going to happen.
it's not going to happen. That's what I said. Exactly. I was like, how do I do this nicely? Not as direct as I normally am, but I just said, it's not going to happen that way. My body isn't built that way. I have got low eggs. I mean, we had the whole conversation and everything like that. So I said, we either need to decide we're not going to have a child, or I said, we need to have medical intervention. There's not going to be just a, like, let's just have a good time as husband and wife and see what happens. And so once I think he got his head wrapped around that, which was a very different process because obviously I got to make all the choices with my first round, it was interesting having to educate him as well as then try to figure out, like, what is this process now with another person, because now I'm in a whole different ball game of different things of using his sperm, but all the things. And so I want to say it was right before we got married, June of 2019. We found through a referral a great person to have his reversal, which we had had a friend that had a reversal and was successful. And we were like, well, you can't beat that. Like we know the person, the doctor was highly recommended, all of that stuff. So in June of 2019, he went and got reversed. And then shortly after, it's similar to the process of vasectomy, where you go in and make sure that your swimmers aren't swimming. You do this process to go make sure that they are now off of their, lounge chairs and they're swimming again. And of course, true to course with Mark, they were all swimming. They were like back in action, very excited because that doctor gave us like a 10% chance of it working too. He's like, it's very hard to get those pieces back together once you've snipped them. So he said, like, I do my best, but it is what it is. Like, I can't promise anything. And sure enough, you look under the little microscope and they're all just having a great time back at like swimming again. So his side worked phenomenal. Like everything was good. It gave us like a good, vibe and sign that everything was good. And then we go to the fertility consult, assuming it was just going to be the similar thing. Like instead of a sperm donor, we would just use Mark's sperm and then we would do IUI. It was kind of what I
Hmm.
assumed it would be.
Yep.
And the doctor said, "Oh, I love you for thinking that, but you are now 39. Your egg reserve is completely like diminished. Like it's never going to happen that way. You're going to waste a lot of money and a lot of heartbreak on trying that way." He's like, "You are going to either, he's like, the only option you really have is to do an egg donor." And I was like, "Oh my God, an egg donor." I knew a little bit about it from some of the fertility groups that I had joined since I had my older son, but I was like, "What?" And so then I had to leave that consult and go do a bunch of research, but it's very similar to sperm donor. Obviously, it's just on the other side. So you look through the same catalog now of baby women, of little baby women, of what they look like and their personalities and all of the things. And then he and I had to go pick which egg donor we wanted instead of the sperm donor for the first time.
And then you still have like these baby pictures too.
Yes. Yep.
And like you get the known or unknown choices.
You don't get that. They
Okay.
must not give women that chance, and I don't know why. For whatever reason, I remember I asked the question, I never really got a straight answer, but no, there is no, probably because there's so many more eggs. So like maybe there's, more chance of higher them having more children. I'm not sure, but there is no chance. So no, if my
Interesting.
youngest son ever wants to know his biological, the egg donor, he can't. And I don't know who she is. Like all I have is baby picture and a little kid pictures or whatever. So we had to go through that process together, which was much easier to go through it as, a single person because I got to make all the choices.
I
So
was
that
gonna
was
say, yeah, there's no like agree or
mhm,
disagree.
mhm, yeah. So it was interesting from that perspective, but again, I think we narrowed it down to 3, and then we got rid of 1 for some reason, and then we looked at the 2, and Mark played football in high school and college, and this woman was a cheerleader and just had kind of, and I was like, that's a cute story, like cheerleader, football
Yeah.
player,
Yeah.
all of the things. And
You're
so
like, you don't get to really be with them,
yeah,
but
exactly. I was like, yeah, I was like, this, you can't make this up. So it's just interesting going through the process both times and of the things that matter to you at the time. So we picked that egg donor. And so then it gets very complicated in terms of I have to tell my body it's going to get pregnant, but it doesn't understand because it's not really going to do anything for a while. And then she has to go through the same process at the same exact time. We have to be kind of synced up, or has to be synced up. And then she gets the eggs taken out of her, and then they get inseminated with Mark's sperm very quickly, and then I come in and get inseminated within 5 days. So it's like this very tight timeline of how everything has to happen at the right time for it to be successful.
So, just to be clear, and maybe this is crass, but egg and sperm are joined like in a petri dish.
They are. Yep. So Mark
Okay.
had to go in, and there's I call it kind of the secret room. So there's one main kind of office where all of the procedures happen. You have your consults, all this stuff, and then you pass that door and you go to like the secret room where Mark goes into the room and makes his donation into a cup. And then she's back in that same area getting her eggs taken out in a room. And then there's all these men in like white suits, like little suits and everything like that. And then there's 2 little doors that open and then they magically appear. And then that lab person mixes everything together.
So, you're actually in the same facility building as the mother at the same time, but it's like the cop stuff where it's like, don't
Yeah.
let the
Yeah.
person see the other person.
Yes, I
That's
wasn't
insane.
there, but Mark was there in the secret, man room, and then she was there at the same time having her procedure to remove the eggs at the same exact time. And then yes, they time it. So Mark's is obviously much quicker process. And so Mark leaves and goes down or whatever, and then they make sure that he's gone before she leaves the building. Yes.
Interesting.
So she's someone
It's a
local to
covert
Minnesota, but
operation.
yeah, a very covert operation from that perspective. Yeah, absolutely. And so that was June of 2009, 2020. And then you wait to see how everybody develops, and that's when they start to look at embryo quality and blastocytes, and you learn about, do you want A's and B's and all of the things. And then they call you and about every 2 days and say like what's happening with each embryo, and then they tell you when to come in, and then you trigger shot so that I release, so that I, kind of come in there like my body is prepared to get pregnant. And
Sure.
then IVF is obviously very different than IUI, just in terms of then it doesn't have to go through all those body parts. They literally implant it into your uterus.
Now, are they implanting multiple fertilized eggs?
You can. We didn't. You can. We only had one that made sense that had come into the right blastocyte, all the like jargon that they tell you, like they said I would pick the best one. But this is exactly how like Octomom had her 8 kids, is they
Sure.
implanted 8 embryos. So we could have, and I know a lot of people that do 1 or 2 just to up your chances, so it definitely
Right.
does
Because I was going to
increase
say
your
sometimes
chances.
they still don't take.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So this is the time when you could say that, and we chose one, and we still have, I think, 4 left over. So we still have 4 that are frozen at
Okay.
the bank as well right now, in case this one didn't take. So we froze 4 and used 1.
So you said this was June 2020.
Yes.
Did you have added obstacles, hurdles, setbacks? Because now we're talking COVID.
Yes. I was so, you just kind of look back, and it happens for a reason and the time it's supposed to. So we had originally supposed to have this done. So we had schedules, and the only thing that wasn't happened is we hadn't ordered the medicine yet, which is expensive. And they called to cancel our protocol because of COVID. So I want to say we were supposed to do this in like March of 2020, and they called and canceled. And I said to Mark, I'm like, thank goodness we hadn't ordered the medicine. That was the only thing we hadn't done. We had all the appointments set up, but then they called and said we have to shut down. Like we're not choosing this. Like we're being forced to shut down. So
Yep.
we can't do anything. And so otherwise we would have been out probably $5,000 for medicine that you can't wait until June to use. Like we would have just been
That's the
out that
medicine
money.
that's getting your body
Yeah.
ready. Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
And once you have it, it's expired and you can't use it again. So it's not like just put it in the fridge and wait until June. So I said there's somebody watching over us for that, to not happen or whatever. So yes, the only thing that affected it was we had it canceled. So we were supposed to do it in March. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, I'm just getting older and older. So that was the only frustration I had with it from that perspective.
Tick, tick, tick.
Tick, tick. Yeah. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, now we're, and obviously in March, nobody knew when everything would open again. So I was like, well, this could be 2 weeks, and it could be 2 months. It could be whatever. And so fast forward to that was March. And then we ended up being able to do everything at the end of June. So I ended up getting pregnant on June 28th of 2020.
I was gonna say, is it kind of that 2 week thing again after the egg is
It is.
implanted?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Because I think it's the same for any way you do it. Natural, any, infertility, fertility. I think you're not going to show up on blood tests until there's enough HGH or, something in your bloodstream to say if you're pregnant or not.
Yeah. So any of these times, again, just my own curiosity,
Yeah.
did you really just be able to wait and go in and get the blood work, or were you taking at-home pregnancy tests?
I didn't. I waited because what I kept hearing from like the groups with my first, there was not as many groups as there is now, but it's just that within a day it could be a difference. So I had a friend of mine that said, it was like a couple days before the 8-year-old, in 2015, and she's like, well, let's just take a test. And I'm like, I know, but the chances of it being negative are high, but then being positive after 2 weeks. So I tried to train myself to say, I don't want a false negative or a false positive. So I didn't, but I know a lot of people do. Trust me, all the groups I'm in, there's all these pregnancy tests that are showing.
I
But
don't think I would have the patience. I feel like anytime I'm like, all right, we've done the deed. Let's take a pregnancy test. Like, and
yes,
obviously everything in my head is like, that's not how this works. I know that.
I
But it's
know.
just like that.
I don't know. Maybe as a single person, especially for the 2015 one, I was like, I don't know if I can handle the false and then the high, like the no, you're not, and then the next day you are. So I just
I was
kept
gonna
thinking
say
in my
either
head,
the disappointment, like you said,
yes,
one way or the other. Disappointment because it's negative, or disappointment because you get
yeah.
yourself excited for something that's not true also.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had to like shun her and all that stuff. And I was like, no, I said, let's just, so for both of them. But I did with the second one, obviously, the second time you're pregnant, I said I had all the same signs as I had with my first. in terms of like heartburn right away, all of that kind of stuff. So I said to my husband, like, this is a good sign. I'm like, I feel the same way I felt
Your
with my first
symptoms.
pregnancy. Yeah, the symptoms were identical. The pregnancy ended up being completely identical, like throwing up, all the things. Like it was almost like it was an identical exact. I carried the same way. We didn't find out with either of them. I didn't find out if I was having a boy or a girl. And my mom, of course, after I had the second boy, said, "Of course it was going to be a boy. Like you were carrying him the
You-
exact same way
You're
that
the
you
same.
carried the first. Yeah, like you looked exactly the same the second time around."
I was gonna say, my husband and I, we haven't found out with any of our three either. But I couldn't tell you from one to the next what I was feeling.
Right.
I was
Yeah.
like, and we went boy, girl, girl. And I was just like, I don't know, they all seem the same.
Exactly. That's why I said to my mom, I'm like, you did? And she's like, well, you looked the same. You had the same symptoms. Like, but I've heard similar to you. Like, it doesn't, it could have been a girl the same way. So, yeah. And that was another sticking point for Mark. He really wanted to find out. And I said, it's so fun to not know. So that was another conversation that was different for me to have to like agree, compromise
Right.
with someone on that
You're
kind
like,
of
this
stuff
is so
too.
much different. It's
Yeah. I
supposed
was
to
like, this
be,
is so
everyone
much
talks about it
different.
being
Yeah.
easier together. You're like, I'm finding it harder.
Yes. I'm used to making all these decisions and now I have to think of somebody else all the time too. And we
So,
didn't tell the kids. So we didn't tell the kids we were doing this. So we didn't tell any of the kids that we were reversing Mark, anything. And so the only person that knew was my mom because she came in June and helped me watch Brevin while we went to the doctor and stuff like that. So she knew that we were going through it because I said, I don't really want to explain to the kids if it doesn't work. Like, okay, we're doing all this stuff and the kids were kind of half on board, half not. Like we have enough kids, we don't need more kids. And so I was like, let's not get them on the roller coaster of whatever this is going to turn out to be until it's actually a pregnancy.
right. So, as I say, was it more the traditional, like at the 20 weeks,
Yes.
you kind of announced it to everyone, or?
Trying to think. We did a family photo shoot with like extended family, like Mark's sister, the grandmas, in at the end of September, I think. And so I was 3 months. I was 3 months. And so we brought like a cute little baby, like booties and all of that stuff to add to the picture to do an announcement. So we told them kind of right at the 3 months. So a little bit earlier than that. So like right at
Yeah.
the 3 months, I think we was happened to be when we were doing the photo shoot that we added the little baby stuff to it.
And that was the
That
big
was the big
reveal.
one. Yep, and it was very emotional. So, I mean, it was more emotional than I guess that we thought it would be because we had already talked to the kids about potentially, like, what do you think? And they had all given kind of their opinions. And what we learned was once they gave us their opinion, we thought that meant that we were taking that opinion. So once they said like we don't think we need more kids, then they thought it was off the table. So there was a little bit of frustration that they didn't get to make the decision that we,
It
oh,
wasn't their choice. You
that
were
wasn't
just
their
hearing
choice.
them.
Yes, yes. So that was an interesting process. So each child had, a mixed reaction and had to take steps to kind of talk them through everything. But yeah, it was interesting because I was like, why? I wasn't expecting this much emotion out of one of them. And it was because like, well, I said I didn't think you guys needed more kids. So I figured it was off the table. I'm like, oh, interesting. Okay.
And here you are telling me we're having one, not thinking about
Yes.
having one, but we
Yes.
are
We're
having one.
having one. Yeah, like baby inside right now. And it's not, your mom and I'm sure now looking back I'm sure it was a lot for little brains to comprehend from that perspective. So but now obviously almost 3 years later everybody the 3-year-old is absolutely in love with all of his siblings, the 8-year-old, and he fight like regular brothers and sisters like they would more than I thought they would with the huge age gap. But now it's very sweet to see their relationships come about.
Yeah. So after baby two, then was at that point like another discussion of we're complete, we're not complete, where are we at, what are we thinking?
I was probably 99% sure I was complete. I always joke with Mark that if a baby just magically showed up on our doorstep, that would be great. Like especially a little girl since I've only had two boys and I jumped into having a stepdaughter at like, her teen years, so it would be fun to have like a little girl. So,
Hmm.
but I always joke if one just magically showed up there. I said if somebody in high school, like one of Grace's friends gets pregnant and, needs a mom, I said I would love to take it. I said I don't want to be pregnant again. And I had a very traumatic birth with Gannon. Like it didn't go well, all of the things. So I said, all of that has made me know that I don't want to carry another baby. But if we just magically got a baby dropped off on our porch, I would take it. But I did want to keep the embryos frozen for people in my life that might need them. So that is an ongoing conversation that Mark and I are having because I said, you really need to be okay with this because it's your biology, not mine. I said,
Sure.
I'm okay with it because of the lifestyle and like the beautifulness of this community and other women that might not be able to have children or couples. But I said, it shouldn't be 100% my decision because it's not my biology. Like you're literally going to have another offspring out there if somebody else uses it. And it took him a while to come around to it, but he said the great, like that would actually be amazing, and jokingly, like if they become famous football player, like I did that, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Like, but I said more than anything, it's for other people that can't have children to give them an opportunity to have a child. Like it's an already fully fertilized embryo, which is like this amazing thing that I've learned through this process is about embryo donation and all these people that are looking for their either them or their spouse can't have children. And so now you can, donate them for free, this embryo.
Huh. I didn't know that was a thing either.
So we have to pay every 6 months at our fertility clinic to keep it, frozen. Otherwise,
You're paying like a storage fee.
you're paying so much. Yep. And he has a family member that is having some fertility issues. I have a family friend that's daughter is having some fertility issues that I've already had the conversation saying like, there's a ready-made embryo. If you ever want to try it, like just let me know, kind of thing. So it's helped me open up the conversation, but I'm not ready to get rid of the embryos. I really want them to go to someone that needs them.
Sure.
But it's not my body that needs them.
Right. Awesome. Well, like I said, that's definitely a different story than most, not than all. I think in a previous kind of the form I had you fill out,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned either starting like a company or a group that kind of deals with like dedicated to like single mothers by choice. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I was having a business. We got to have like a free business coach for 6 months, and we're kind of going back and forth about like how do you get your next role, how do you get all this kind of stuff. And I said, can we talk about personal things too in our lives and all of the things? And she's like, absolutely, I'd rather do that. Like it's boring to talk about corporate all the time. And I'm like, great. So she had me do this exercise where and I highly recommend anybody to do this, not just if you're thinking about starting a company, but it was a fascinating process. She had me write down myself and all of the things I am. So you start with the easy ones, like I'm a daughter, I'm a mother, I'm a
I was gonna say, I am a
godmother.
mom. That's
Right,
like always the first thing out of
right,
my mouth.
100%. And you're a daughter, and I'm a stepmom. So I mean, some of those ones are going to be easy, right? But then you start to get down, and you're just started to talk about things, and then single mother by choice. I'm a second wife. I'm all these things that are unique to not everybody, to your point, but to some people, obviously. Like, I'm a second wife. I'm a this, and that brings on a whole different thing because I've never been married, so Mark doesn't have to deal with an ex-husband, and so it was a fascinating process to write down all these things that you are that you don't think about until you're forced to go down to the granular level, not just the basics of like I'm a mom, I'm a daughter, I work, all the things, whatever those are. I'm a stay-at-home mom. And so the single mom by choice kind of stuck out at me. And Mark said, but you're not anymore because you're married to me. And I'm like, you're never not a single mother by choice because he's donor conceived and like that's the community and that was the choice I made. So I said, even if you're married, you're still a single mother by choice because he's donor conceived. And it started to make me think of all these things. And I said, this is the issue is that there's not a lot of people talking about it. There's not a lot of resources. There's not a lot of representation. As people in the media are talking about representation is important. I just feel like there isn't a lot of representation. If you went out to search for a shirt to be a mom or a stay-at-home mom or a stepmom, there's a million shirts. There's a million things you can get, funny, not funny, serious, cute, all the things. There's literally one shirt you could get that says single mother by choice, and it's not the cutest shirt ever. One shirt in all of Etsy. That's it. So I started to do some research and I was like, there isn't a lot out there. There's communities, there's podcasts, there's stuff like that, which is great. But if you want to, you see all the nurses and teachers and all the people in our lives, collectively that can go out and get apparel and go out and get things that are suited for them that they can say, like, I'm a nurse and I'm exhausted. There's nothing for like single mother by choice. There was that one shirt, that's it. And a couple other things that I saw. And I was like, I remember how tough it was in 2015 about getting things that kind of talked to who I was, and I want to create that for this community. So I'm starting a t-shirt subscription. So monthly, the single mothers by choice will get a brand new t-shirt that is exclusively for them about being a single mother by choice. And then another offering is going to be a subscription box for self-care. So because most of them are alone and don't have a partner, they don't splurge on things for themselves. So it's going to be just for the mothers and, to have some time away from the children to rejuvenate and celebrate the fact that they made this huge decision.
I was gonna say, and I think maybe a lot of it is things that are taboo
Yeah.
in our society and culture. It's like everyone strays away from discussing it or talking about it or bringing it to the forefront. But like you said, I'm a single mother by choice. You want to celebrate.
Yeah. Well, and one of the questions on the form too, it was interesting. You're like, what are the misconceptions? And
Yeah.
by far, one of the biggest and it just goes to exactly what you said is that the misconception is that we're all man-hating women that had all these great options of men throughout our lives, but we chose to not take any of those great men, and that we're going to do this all on our own, and that it's so feminist, and that it's throwing something in their face. I started to post on social media about single mother by choice and box, and I got several emails from men that said, well, if the dad's involved, don't bash him. And I was like, well, this has nothing to do with, there is no dad. Like,
Yeah.
that's where, so I think there's this huge misconception that we all hate men, that we're all angry, and and that this was like second choice for everybody, that we would have all ultimately loved to have like the Prince Charming happen. And it's not. It's a choice that a lot of people are making for themselves at younger ages. There's 26, 27-year-old women that are choosing to do this because they don't want to wait, and they want to become mothers. Like, a lot of us grew up, playing baby dolls and wanting to be moms. And so there's no reason that you need to wait until I did at 35 to do this. Like, I'm just learning so much more about, doing this sooner than later if one of your passions is to become a mother. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions and underrepresentation about this choice, that it's second choice, that it's not a good choice, that it's like your default, that you really would prefer to have a man. And what I'm reading and what I'm learning from a lot of these women that are doing this isn't like, this is their choice. Like, I never once said I need to do this because I don't have a husband. It was, I want to become a mother, and this is the path that has been chosen for me.
Sure. And say, so then for those who might be considering a more unconventional path to motherhood, what would be your biggest piece of advice to offer them?
Depending on where you are in the process, like, because my stepdaughter has a mother too, I kind of have to weave a line. But I would highly recommend everyone to freeze their eggs younger. I wish I would have had that conversation, and I wish people would have been talking about it, but I would have had a way more opportunity to have my own eggs had I froze them when I was like in my 20s, like people are doing now. So freezing eggs, depending on where you are in your age journey, is something I would definitely recommend. And then the second piece for me, at least, is skip the primary care or an OB doctor and go straight to a fertility clinic. Most of them, at least I know, I'm speaking to Minnesota. I can't speak to every state, but there's no referral required. I literally called them and explained kind of where I was at, and you go in and have a consult. So I would just go in and just have that baseline consult, because had I not done that, I would have had no idea what my fertility issue was, but what the good things were too. And I just think that there's, as you guys could hear in my story, so many different things and layers that only specialists and true fertility doctors know. Like, your general doctors just, and even your OBs aren't going to have that information because they're not trained and they don't live it every day. Literally, my fertility doctor, that's all he does, is
Right. And
talk
I'm
about
saying, even
fertility.
at that point, your thought was still, I'm healthy, fine, and my eggs are great. I just need a sperm
Yes, that's all
to
I
find
thought.
out, like, nope, that's not where you're at.
Yeah, and do that sooner. Like, as I was preparing for this, I said I should write my ex-colleague, a note saying, only because of our conversation did I go have that consult, because I was like, God, you're only 3 years older than me. I need to go get checked out then too. I didn't even think of that. Like, I just figured, to your point, I would, get some sperm and everything would be great. So the earlier you can go to have this consult, just to figure it out. And even if you're 26 or 27 or 30 learning about this, just seeing where you're at now. So then at least your options are that you can leave there with a clean bill of health and say, like, here's where you're at right now, great egg quality, great everything. And then you kind of know at least that woman math, that timeline, that ticking timeline that you have. You don't know unless you don't know. So until she mentioned it to me that she had fertility issues, I had never thought that that would even be something I needed to consider. So
Right.
had it,
Why? Yeah. Why would I think I'm having any issues?
yeah. Never had, stayed on birth control, did all the right things through my 20s. So I just figured everything was working as it was supposed to. So I was just waiting for the husband, and then I was just going to wait for the sperm. But obviously there was many other layers that had to be discussed. And if you don't go have that initial consult until you're like 37, 38, it just lowers the different options that you have.
For sure. All right. So, with like all the experiences you've highlighted, is there anything that stands out like the most to you, and why?
I think the biggest thing for me, and Mark jokes about it, or the family jokes about it, is I'm very much a jump off the dock kind of person, that you have to try something for it to be successful or not. You can't just sit on the sidelines and hope and wish. I have a couple people that I'm friends with on Facebook that are older than me that say, I wish I could do this or I wish I could do that. But until you, if I wasn't successful with the IUI or IVF, if I didn't, I would never know that if I didn't try. So if there is any remote thought in anybody's mind to try anything, that would just be my thing is you have to jump off the dock for it to even be an option for anything because you can't just stay on the sidelines and just magically think something's going to happen. So I'm so proud of myself for doing all the research and then just doing it and saying if it works it works, if it doesn't it doesn't. Like I have to at least try. So if had I not done that at the beginning, I don't know if I would have met Mark. I don't know all the things that have transpired in my life since then all are based on me taking the chance to have that IUI in 2014 and hoping for the best.
And I was going to say, I think that's a very powerful message just for all of us as moms for our children.
Yeah,
They have to try. Let
they
them
do.
try.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
you
simple
know?
thing as I was thinking about it, but I was like, had I not tried it or had I thought, no, I'm just going to wait a little bit longer, like who knows what the egg, it's just you go backwards and you're like, I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't just said, like, I got to try right now. Like, right now is the time. I've done all the research, I've done everything right. Just try, because there's always that person inside your head saying, like, no, this is silly. Just wait. I'm sure the guy for you is right around the corner. But I just said, like, no, I've done all the research. Just jump off the dock. Go. Jump off the dock.
Yeah.
See
And
what happens.
I was saying, we hear that so often from, at least I do, from my kids, different times. I can't. Why can't you? Like,
Right.
why can't you? Who's told you you can't?
Right.
Like
Absolutely.
you
So
said,
I just,
try.
yeah, I think that to me, I mean, that's what I look to as like that changes the trajectory of my life, like in just in terms of course becoming a mom, but just that sentiment. And it's just kind of came with me. And I say the same thing to my kids too. Like just when they say something, I'm like, you want to just say, how much I've said this to my 8-year-old, I said, I did a lot of work to have you. So you are going to end, like this is going to happen for you because I put in a lot of work to even get here with you. Like, so, let's talk about what the issue is that you're facing and let's conquer it together because I've told him all the things that, I had to do to have him. We've had open conversations about it. And he made me pee all down the driveway when he was pregnant, just all the things. And so anytime he like stops to complain about something, I'm like, no, listen, I went through medical hoops after medical hoop to have you. So let's figure this problem out because if I can have you, then we can figure this out.
You can tie your shoe, I promise.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
All right. So then what would be, I guess, just your future? What is your goals for your family, goals for yourself personally, goals for your business here with the Single Mothers by Choice subscriptions?
Personally, I want to continue raising the family with transparency. So we've been very transparent with them about how they came about. Brevin calls Mark dad, but we've had conversations about what the sperm donor is and all of that stuff. And so, well, I just love that we live in this transparent place where we can talk about it and that literally all of our kids have such different biological origins, but they're all still siblings and they all love each other. And so personally, I just want to keep fostering that within our own family of just being transparent about how we all came about and that we're all like built with love. It doesn't matter what your biology is. My son, obviously, the 3-year-old or almost 3-year-old, has none of my biological, but he is the mirror image of me personality wise. So it doesn't
Sure.
matter that he loves to eat Doritos and like all the
There's your
things that make
nature
me.
nurture.
Yeah, it is, like nothing of my biology, but 100% like my personality is in that, little child. So it's just been fascinating to watch that. So just still growing that family with transparency and trying to celebrate the different ways that you can. I've shared the story a couple times in my town and they're all shocked. They just think Brevin is Mark's and they're just like, their chins hit the floor when we talk about our story. So I just want to keep talking about it so people understand that there is hope for people that are still waiting to become parents,
Mhm.
personally. And professionally, the subscription offerings launch on the 22nd of January. So I have a wait list up and I want to keep kind of understanding and listening and building the community of where there are pain points and how myself or this community can help them. Is it education? Is it resources? Is it self-care boxes? Is it more representation? What I need to better understand what it is because just because I, want more t-shirts that celebrate it doesn't mean there's more that I'm missing
Sure.
about what this community needs or wants or where their pain points are. So I just need to try to listen to them and I really want to embrace the community itself and try to support it.
Awesome. And are you still working your 9 to 5 and launching this, or are you jumping off the dock into this?
I am jumping off the dock into this. I feel passionate enough about it where I want to spend as much time as I can focusing on this. So
Which
I officially do not have the 9 to 5 job as of January 1st.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
So then let's highlight a little bit. What's your company name, or how can people find you?
Everything is on all of the socials, I believe, except Twitter, but everything else, it's singlemotherbychoicebox.com is the web address, and then everything related to that on Instagram and everything like that. So singlemotherbychoicebox.com
With
is
all
where you can start.
traditional spelling,
Yep,
nothing
yep,
fancy in there? All
yep.
right,
And right
awesome.
now there's just a wait list up because it opens on the 22nd. So I'm trying to make sure that I have all my ducks in a row before it launches, but it will be, a monthly subscription that they can choose from.
Awesome. Can we suspect to see you on Shark Tank then?
That would be fantastic. If it gets to be big enough where I need to have more investment, that's the ultimate goal. I look at these other boxes that have, thousands of subscribers, and it's like that would be amazing because then I would be getting into the homes of all these other single mother by choices and hopefully alleviating some stress or pain that they're experiencing.
Awesome. Well, hopefully this will get you just a little bit more awareness, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else then before we go that you want to share or emphasize?
No, I just want to thank you for being open to having this conversation because, especially, I would say in Minnesota or the Midwest, this isn't widely talked about. So I appreciate the opportunity for you to share this unique kind of journey to becoming a mother. And hopefully, it has spurred other moms that are either themselves or people that they have in their life that, this isn't always the easiest journey and that there is hopefully a light at the end of the tunnel, and that I'm happy to chat with anybody one on one if they want to go through any questions or anything like that, or have any specific things that they would like to follow up with me on. I'm happy to talk to anybody.
No, that's awesome. And Tessa, I appreciate it because there's so many. I mean, I'm a mom, I have 3 kids, but like you said, with just part of your journey, you don't know what you don't know. So there's so much just to be educated on and to continue to learn and to build a community around, specific parts of motherhood, but just motherhood as a whole. So,
Yes, 100%.
well, then that wraps things up here. Thank you so much, Tessa, for joining us today, sharing your experience with us. And all you mamas out there, keep doing your best.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on this roller coaster of momming right here on Momma-Sota. I hope you enjoyed our candid conversation about all things parenting, where perfection is left at the door and real life takes center stage. Stay tuned for more heartfelt, unfiltered discussions in the next episode. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review Momma-Sota on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to us. Until next time, this is Monica Eichmann signing off. Keep rocking that mom life, and remember, you've got this.